Hello everybody, my name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're doing a book review for the second book on the banned ALA books list for 2021 and 2022, though it's not as high in 2022, and it's called Lawn Boy. It's by Jonathan Evison, not to be confused with the book called Lawn Boy that I think by somebody called Gary Paulson. But before we get started, number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The first way to be featured here is through the monthly prompt writing contest called Lamoy, where I give you a prompt. You write a short story or a fragment using that prompt, and then the first Monday video of the month, we bask in the creativity of this community. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, submit your first chapter and your cover page, and they will be read here on the channel, or it will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work, because somebody out there likes what you do, they just haven't met you yet. The third thing is, if you would like to check out any of my books, feel free to judge me. They are available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the library upon request. Check it out, share the love or the hate. That said, let's jump into this. Now, Lawn Boy was number 7 in 2022 and number 2 in 2021. In 2022, the reasons were LGBTQ content plus claimed to be sexually explicit. Meanwhile, in 2021, the reasons were banned for LGBT content and considered to be sexually explicit. Same thing in both years. I always suggest that if you're curious about the content of a book yourself, read it yourself, because I cannot grapple at everything that will stick out to somebody else. So this book is told in a series of titled vignettes that jump around in time. They don't do very well to set the time or place of anything that's going on. It actually felt kind of lazy, kind of novice, kind of like, if not novice, then just super lazy. The author didn't care. The book deal was already made. This book also feels like a self-righteous, self-important attempt to show the world how the poors live from the perspective of a comfortably upper middle class person who's never really suffered, but is putting on the face of the poors for his friends. The thing feels like a mockery of the working class and a lecture at the same time. And the thing is, I don't really care about the own voice movement. I don't really care about own voice hashtagging. However, this book is sold as semi-autobiographical. It is about a very, very poor, single-parented Mexican who runs a lawn business, or is part of a lawn business. He's employed and then he loses his job at the very beginning. And then towards the end of the book, he starts going on his gay tour as he finally comes out as gay in like the last 10%. The author of this book is a white boomer who lived on an island in Washington state and is married to a woman. So I fail to see where the autobiographical parts of this are, why this is even allowed to be sold as autobiographical. And I don't ever want to hear about own voice ever again when you've got people that are defending this book without ever even looking at the fact that it's sold as semi-autobiographical, and the main character has nothing in common with that character. Also, this is the book that convinced me that the ALA's list might be fake and a marketing tool to get people to buy books that people wouldn't buy otherwise. I mean, there is no legitimate reason for this to be on the list unless, number one, it was in grade schools where it doesn't need to be, or number two, it was totally AstroTurf, because nobody freaking reading this book for fun, especially not teenagers. It's like, there's nothing in here. Anyway, let me know what you think on that noise. I'm just like, people can either write the books that they want to write or not write the books that they don't want to write, but like this labeling of stuff where it's autobiographical or semi-autobiographical and there are no discernible parts on how it is your story, it's just, you didn't need to sell it as autobiographical. Okay, anyway, let's get into the story and start talking about how it works, what doesn't work, and where is the pedophilia that will be mentioned in the reviews. So this book opens with a scene where Mike talks about going to Disneyland with his dad, but instead his dad buys liquor and he does not go to Disneyland. The next story is Mike babysitting his mentally handicapped older brother named Nate. He says he's 300 pounds and he's actually happy when Nate's watching TV because it gives him a chance to go and figure himself out, and that's all Mike wants. Mike is reading while ignoring Nate. Quote, The novel is about corporate tyranny in the 1800s and how powerful outside forces impose their will on us and disenfranchise us and beat us to jelly until we're seemingly powerless to fight them because they own the game. They are the landlords of the world. Sound familiar? Take away the sheep-herding poet and the octopus could have been written today. He's reading this book and is interrupted by an alarm going off. Nate is apparently melting a pizza in the oven right now. Mike is like, if it's not for brain damage, Nate would have been something, but oh well. Mom comes home drunk and then goes to get more alcohol, and her kid is making excuses for her. Quote, she set her purse down in the dining room table and proceeded straight to the kitchen for a tumbler of Chardonnay with ice. That's pretty much her go-to, but don't judge her. Let's see you take it on the chin from 3 husbands, your boss, the state, the insurance companies, and anyone else who stands in your way. Let's see you bring home the bacon. Get slapped on the ass all night, do 0 self-care, take 3 vacations in 25 years, and not make a mess of raising kids all by yourself. Yes, it's true. She's been unlucky and unwise in love. It happens, and anyone who has never been a waitress in the Tides Inn with its colorful characters, its gazillion cast of scratch tickets, and its signature bouquet of mop water and burnt hamburger meat will tell you that the place just takes the oomph right out of you. Between the job and Nate, she hasn't got much for herself by day's end. He goes on about how things are expensive and they're doing the best that they can, so step off and don't judge him. Mom gets down in the lazy boy with her drink. Mom says that she's picked up a shift at work tomorrow and then goes off to bed. Mike looks around at the broken sink in the house. He's disappointed because he had plans tomorrow, but now he has to stay at home and watch his stupid brother. He plans to ask someone named Remy out though, and this Remy girl works at basically the Village Inn / Denny's of where he lives. Quote, Nick says that I need to hurry up and hit that shit. But then, Nick's kind of a dumb shit. Now, if this sounds like an adult or a teenager, you would be right, because we only had that first chapter that was as a child looking back on being with his dad. And then the rest of it is him reminiscing as a 20-year-old until we're finally in this situation where he is a 20-year-old. Yeah, then we skip forward in time to when Nick and Mike are sitting in the booth where Remy works, and Mike is talking about how much he admires Remy. She's got a job, she's comfortable. He comes in twice a week so that he can see her. Nick tells Mike to make a move already, but then they're kind of just hanging out. And this book already feels much more like lessons of the day than anything. Quote, make a move already, Michael. It's getting a little creepy, you eating here twice a week. No wonder you're broke all the time. Just get off my back for once, would you? Jesus, why are you so sensitive? Speaking of fags, look at that homo by the window. And lay off that fag stuff, I said. And you don't even know that guy. Oh, are you a fag too? No, as a matter of fact, I'm not. It's just, what difference does it make about anybody's lifestyle or whatever? Fags are just people. Yeah, people who stick shit up their butts. You like The Rock, don't you? What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Everybody knows he's gay. Fuck off. That's the stupidest shit I've ever heard. The fucking Rock gay. Somewhere under the bravado and the habitual bigotry and the general stupidity, Nick's got a good heart, I swear. And he's had my back many times, and Nate's too. I guess I'm a loyalist at the end of the day. Just about everybody lets you down sooner or later, so if you know anybody who hasn't totally betrayed you, I figure you're pretty smart to stick by them, warts and all. He also mentions here how he sucked another kid's dick in the 4th grade and wonders why the guy, now a real estate agent, doesn't talk to him. So that is going to be the moment that is referenced as how this is pedophilic. Is there is no detail. He just says this kid in the 4th grade sucked his dick, and then it's going to come up when he runs into this guy. But he just mentions it in passing. So it was another 10-year-old giving him a blowjob. He gave another 10-year-old a blowjob. That is the extent of pretty much that conversation. So to call this pedophilic is not. It's just somebody recalling something that happened. Is it gross? Yes. Was it necessary to the plot? No. And the way that it's used is just so unnecessary that it doesn't need to be here, but it's not pedophilic. Mike's brother Nate has an episode and flips out the table because, you know, he's got a little more than the tism, and so starts making a scene. Mike tries to ask Remy out while she cleans up the floor underneath the table, but she basically is like, go and collect your brother while she finishes cleaning up. The next story is how he lost his virginity at a party with a girl named Gina. Nick set him up with this girl by calling her drunk self over just after Nick and Mike had talked about nipples and what her nipples must look like. She cheated on her boyfriend for the next 60 seconds, came, and then was done. The next story is about how his mother struggled to take care of her children. Dad wasn't around. They had to move it in with Mike's aunt, who was like, "This is what you get for marrying a Mexican." They struggled to rent a place, but eventually did. And Mike is like, "This is where dads 2 and dad 3 come in, but everyone mom married was a lazy fuck." Quote, "Stepdad 2 was Ronnie, a guy who liked to pump a little iron and go crabbing until he married my mom, that is, after which point he simply enjoyed being a fat fuck and sitting in a chair." Both Chuck and Ronnie suffered very audibly from chronic back pain, migraine headaches, and general debilitating conditions called the fucking system. Both stepdads in the Victor Muniz mold were work averse, and both played a little guitar. In the case of both Chuck and Ronnie, the honeymoon ended abruptly, with neither marriage lasting 2 years. He says kids are a product of their environment, probably so he's going to change his environment and get out of this mess. He talks about how the kids at school don't really know what they've got, and that people around him help them with all of the good stuff that they have. It's kind of ranty and seems jealous as he talks about the Tuesday accounts for his landscape business, and he looks upon all of these people with enough money to hire him. Quote, "All our Tuesday accounts are located across the Agate Passage on Bainbridge. We call the bridge the service entrance because virtually nobody on the island, as far as I can tell, mows their own lawn or maintains their own pool or cleans their own gutters. Nobody drives a brick-dick truck either, unless it's from 1957. Even the high-class school kids with names like Asher and Towner drive new cars. They seem happy and healthy, if not a little bored. They all appear harmless, they all appear harmless enough on the surface, except for most of them don't seem to realize how good they've got it or how people less fortunate than them have helped account for their good fortune, have even suffered so that they could enjoy their wealth and security. But like I said, one day I'm gonna get mine. It probably won't be Tuesday though. Tuesdays start with half a day of Truman's, a huge residence over on the east side of the island with 200 feet of high bank waterfront on sounds facing a bollard, all of it hemmed in by boxwood borders. So I'm wondering, is this what he means by being autobiographical? Did he just kind of sit in his window on his island in Washington State and like look at his neighborhood of these richy rich kids and be like, you know what, I'm gonna judge myself for not being grateful for everything that I have because I'm super rich and I'm super fortunate, and as a kid I don't appreciate it? Like, is the autobiographical part him just watching the landscapers on the island he grew up on? Quote, "There's an acre of manicured lawn, which Truman makes us mow with an old rotary mower, which he must have inherited from Fred Flintstone. No leaf blowers allowed at Truman's either. No radios, and especially no salsa music, which is fine by me. I guess when you're a big, rich, important person, sitting around on your ass, meditating on your big, important, rich guy thoughts, moving your money around in the free market, the one built on the backs of slaves and children, you can't be bothered with noisy lawnmowers." He's just talking about yard work he's going to do now. This in particular felt insulting to me. Quote, "One pesky limb in particular thwarted my efforts. One very proud and protruding limb. It was a teachable moment, really. I learned that sometimes it's better to give in to the thing itself than to fight it, which is to say my masterpiece ended up being a merman with an erection. I guess you could say that the erection was already there. I just freed it." Because it's a mockery of someone else's quote about art, and this book is a mockery of every artist in existence. Yeah, that's pretty much the only thing that I take away from this book, is that it is a mockery toward artists and everything in this book, especially the lower and working class. Anyway, Mike is then complaining about how he doesn't like who he works for, and if he were in charge, he'd be more choosy about his clientele, which includes no rich fucks. Sounds like a business that he wants to fail, honestly. Mike also complains about how his boss sucks because he doesn't let his employees smoke pot on the job. The boss showed up because Mike was just vomiting all over the yard since he came into work hungover, and the boss is like, "You drunk?" Mike's told to go clean up the yard of one of the clients, meaning that he also has to pick up the dog poop because he's going to be working on the yard. Mike is like, "I would drop this client too if I were in charge." Then it's raining, and the house also has a huge dog who leaves giant turds all over that keep breaking through the bag. Mike looks at the St. Bernard living in luxury and goes, "I won't blame the dog, but you see what's wrong with this picture?" And then he leaves because he can't be bothered to clean clean up the yard with a broken bag in the rain and poop the size of a house cat. The next day, Mike is lectured for not cleaning up after the dog and for abandoning his work. Mike's throwing a fit because, quote, I'm a landscaper, not a shit picker-upper. Mike is like, fine, maybe this is the start of my new life and I'll do something else where people actually respect me. After being let go on his job, he goes to the library to hang out because that's where he often hangs out when he's waiting for his mom, or used to hang out where he waited for his mom, and the library gives him a bunch of comfort. Here, the book goes a bit meta, quote, for 2 hours, waiting for Nick to get off work at Le Schwab, I scanned the fiction section for a distraction. What I wanted was a book written by a guy who worked as a landscaper or a cannery grunt or a guy who installed heating vents. Something about modern class struggle in the trenches. Something plain spoken, without these shiver-thin coverlets of snow and all the rest of the luminous prose. Something that didn't have a pretentious quote at the beginning from the old geezer poet that gave away the whole point of the book. Something that didn't employ the fishbowl lens or a prismatic narrative structure or any of the crap they teach rich kids out in the cornfields. Also, it continues to prove how negative and mean-spirited it is, as everything is an insult to someone who isn't Mike. And more narcissism. Quote, not 250 pages of nasal gaving about the nuances of saddle making, topped off with some hokey epiphany. I wanted realism, grit. I wanted my transcendence with grease under the fingernails and unpaid bills piling up on the countertop. Where were the books about me? Maybe I should write the goddamn great American landscaping novel. Why shouldn't I have a voice? Just because I never went to college? Because I haven't traveled the world or lived in New York City or fought in Iraq or done anything else of distinction? I suppose you could make a strong argument for any of those, but I believe the world could use the great American landscaping novel. I need the books about me is becoming an increasingly common critique of like everything. Where am I in this novel? It's not about you, sweetie. Quote, after all, most of us are mowing someone else's lawn one way or another, and most of us can't afford to travel the world or live in New York. Most of us feel like the world is giving us a big fat middle finger when it's not kicking us in the face with steel-toed boots. And most of us feel powerless, motivated, but powerless, entertained, but powerless, informed, but powerless, fleeting content most of the time, broke, sometimes hopeful, but ultimately powerless. And angry. Don't forget angry. The problem, I soon come to realize, was that landscapers, especially unemployed ones, and cannery grunts, and heating duct installers, didn't have time to while away their days while writing novels. They had bills to pay, cars to fix, disabled siblings to care for. This reads to me like an author diatribe, but let me just opine on how much I hate the bills to pay argument, because I hear it all the time from right-to-market authors saying, oh, I'm glad that you can write your passion and write what you want to write, but I have bills to pay, so I'm gonna churn out as much garbage as I possibly can in order to make a bunch of money on a current trend in smut. The mindset assumes that if you write books or do art for the sake of art or because you're driven to tell a specific story, then you have or come from money. It disenfranchises people who work full-time, give up social hours to work on books, to tell the stories that they want to tell, and not because it's popular or will make them money. Writing in the publishing industry very traditionally used to be only something that elitists could do. In part, traditional writing is still very much that, considering how many authors and agents talk about their connections and having met people in college or having met people at events, and they got those deals through their connections. There are still many authors who make it because they come from money, because they have those elite connections that can get them inside the publishing industry. And for a book ranting about disenfranchisement to then disenfranchise others because it's so angry is ridiculous. The author goes into a more meta with, quote, I finally picked up a handful of titles off the new arrivals rack, though none of them really appealed to me. One of them was a dystopian novel about a global pandemic with metaphorical implications. So was another. The last was a woman named Hannah who'd won a prize that I'd never heard of, was billed as a stunning meditation on race, gender inequity, and sexual identity. MFA fiction, said a voice. Mike asks the librarian for a recommendation for angry fiction and is given The Jungle by some guy named Sinclair. After he gets some angry books, he meets Nick at Tequila's. Nick goes on insulting Mexicans, a pastor's son as a fag, and how he wants to make all of this money to get all of that pussy. Meanwhile, Mike's lecturing Nick about why don't you get a girlfriend and build a future instead of trying to get as much poon as possible. Quote, You ever been to Tijuana? Fuck no. Why would I want to go to Tijuana? Hey, look at that bag over there by the jukebox, he said. That's Ron Strobeck's little brother. He's a youth pastor. He's a total homo. Nick, do you have any idea what a dumb shit you sound like? I mean, like 90% of the time. Hey, you're the one mowing lawns, chowder hound. I stopped mowing lawns for money when I was 12. I made 31 grand last year at Les Schwab's. So who's the dumb shit? Come on, don't you want more? Yeah, more pussy. I'm being serious, Nick. So am I. I'd like to be getting considerably more pussy than I'm currently getting. What about a steady girlfriend then? Fuck that noise. Then I'd never get laid. See? You sound like a total misogynist when you say stuff like that. Fuck you. I don't see you getting laid. This isn't about getting laid, Nick. This is about your life. What are you, my guidance counselor now? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Seriously, Les Schwab's? What is it with you tonight? Just answer the question. I don't see myself in 10 years. Why would I want to do that? I'll probably be fat and my hair will be gone. You're really starting to piss me off with this superiority complex of yours, Michael. You work with a crew of illegals mowing old ladies' lawns. I just don't see where you get off judging anybody. I really don't. Is this a Reddit moment? Really cringy though. Who casually has conversations like this with their friends? The above is followed by the most judgmental and self-righteous monologue by the main character so far. Quote, maybe Nick was right. Maybe it wasn't my place to judge, but his ignorance seemed willful, or maybe it was just lazy, which was also willful. Whatever the case, I was running out of patience for it, growing wary of the exercise, mostly fruitless, which comprised of coaxing out Nick's good side. Such was my fatigue that over the course of the next 2 beers, I didn't even bother telling him that I'd quit my job or how I'd struck out with Remy. Maybe besieged by doubt and insecurity, I couldn't see how telling Nick anything would make me feel better. This whole section also sounds like an MFA student wrote it, to be honest. In the next story, Mike's thinking about how useless he is, that he can't get a job doing anything else, and calls the people at Uber fascist without elaborating. Considering that he doesn't even want to do a landscaping job, I don't know how I'm supposed to take fascist here. He applies for a job at Subway that he can't get because he can't work the night shift, and then he complains about how he can't get any job whatsoever. Quote, I was teachable, hardworking, flexible. I had a strong back, a quick mind, a willingness to endure repetition. I was punctual, honest, and conscientious. I sometimes played well with others, so what happened to all of the fucking jobs? There had to be jobs out there for a guy like me. Wasn't the American dream built on the idea of equal opportunity? So where was my opportunity? I wasn't asking for handouts. All I wanted was a job that provided a living wage and a little dignity. That seemed like a reasonable launching pad for any further ambitions I might have. All I needed was the opportunity to think beyond sustenance long enough to dream. You think that this might have something to do with how your last boss might not have great words for you, great words of recommendation, if you're even using him, and if you're not using him, then you don't have like a work history. He then applies for jobs with reckless abandon, going for anything and everything until he's lying on his resume to get interviews with the newspaper. Now the question comes here. Was it diversity hiring that got him the job, or are all journalistic standards really so low that they will hire somebody with literally zero abilities to even write a cover essay? Though Mike gets an interview, he doesn't interview well and gets sent out. In the next story, the shed where Mike keeps his things is rented out to some guy named Freddie who showed Mike his porn collection forever ago. Also, Mike's called up about a job opportunity that opened up. He tries to get there, but his truck dies on the way, so he just heads home. People throw things at him as he walks home. Why are a bunch of people like randomly on the side of the road throwing things at somebody walking on the side of the road with his lawnmower? I don't really know. Mike's now struggling to do anything or have a job, just unemployed for weeks and suffering on end. He goes to the grocery store where he admires a native man and shits on white people for going to college, and they can pretend to be whatever they want, but if you look homeless outside of a store, you get shit on. Mike returns home and his lawnmower is gone because it couldn't sit in the shed since that's where Freddie was living. He curses his mom because he told her that it would happen since the shed was being rented out, and he gets told to stop swearing. The guy they rented the shed to is like, profanity is a class indicator. Depressed, Mike goes to the gas station to get a beer, but he doesn't have enough money. Remy shows up in line and pays the 30 cents he's missing and then offers to take him home. He's told so many lies to her about who he is and how he's doing it, he has her drop him off a couple of blocks away from his house so that she doesn't see where he lives. When he gets home, he's upset, feeling sorry for himself, and goes into the bathroom and cries about how much of a loser he is. Mike finally gets a new job where he's making more money than he ever has before. He doesn't do anything for this job, it just sort of falls into his lap and somebody is like, hey, you want to work for this? And they're like, okay, cool. He's also listening to his new boss, Chaz, as he says, quote, thus beginning his 10-minute soliloquy on entrepreneurship. Old Chaz had a lot more irons in the fire than just glow-in-the-dark keychains and the like. I could barely keep up. It seemed that Chaz Unlimited Liability was only the flagship. There was Chazzy Chaz LLC, Chaz in Charge LLC, and All That Chaz LLC. He had admitted to having no liquid assets at the moment, but contracts at the yin-yang. Smoke and mirrors, he explained. The thing about never having money your whole life is that you have no way of learning about money. It's like learning how to play Yahtzee with no dice. If I understood Chaz right, everything that I knew about finances was ass backwards. Apparently, you don't want to pay your bills on time. In fact, you don't want to pay them until someone puts a gun to your head. If you can avoid paying them at all, that's the best scenario. And here I've been worried about late notices all of these years. Oh, and it turns out that debt is actually a good thing. You want to owe the bank money. If you've got bank's money, you owe the bank. See? Desperate to acquire new friends, he continues to go to lunch with these new people at his workplace, even though he hates all of them. He admits that he hates them. He is so judgmental and resentful about everyone around him. He looks at his coworkers with contempt and wonders why he doesn't have any friends. Mike eventually invites one of his coworkers over to his house. However, when the coworker is there, roommate Freddie insults him. Mike is also super self-conscious of like everything that his coworker is seeing. The coworker leaves and it is unreceptive to being at Mike's house. Mike reflects on being a social dud. Then he's hanging out with Nick at a bar and hating how repetitive his work is. Nick invites Mike to a ball game because he's got a good contract that got him tickets, and so that's coming up. Then Mike randomly goes on to joke about what's the difference between a fridge and a fag, so Mike can freak out at him again. As you can see, every time Mike and Nick are together, Nick is saying something about fags. Quote, what is it with you? What about you? Why are you always bashing people? Mexican, fags, lesbians? I don't get why they offend you so much. What did a Mexican or a fag ever do to you? Nick doesn't answer, just sips his beer irritably. Seriously, I just don't get it, Nick. You don't even have a reason. Duh, Michael. Look around. They're taking our jobs. They don't pay taxes. Fags don't pay taxes. No dumb shit illegals. And for your information, they're not normal. Mexicans? No fags. What's normal then, Nick? Tell me that. Your porn habit? The way that you talk about women? Oh, like you don't watch porn? Actually, no. You're a liar. What if I told you that I touched another guy's dick? I said. Nick waved me off and turned his attention back to his beer. What if I told you I sucked it? Will you please just shut up already? I'm dead serious, Nick. Well, I'd say you're a fag. I was 10 years old, but it's true, I put Doug Gobble's dick in my mouth. The real estate guy? Yeah. Nick looked around frantically. What the fuck are you talking about, Michael? I was in 4th grade. It was no big deal. This dialogue was painful to read. They keep on arguing and Nick is like, you're not in love with me, are you? And Mike is like, lol, no. No guy would ever be in love with you. And Nick is like, bruh, the gays love me. I am like king of the gays. I have seen them stare at me and my ass from across the room. They keep going on so that Mike can lecture. Quote, you hate women, you hate gays, you hate Mexicans. I don't hate women. You hate these people because you're scared, Nick. Bullshit. Because you're insecure about your own intelligence, your own sexuality, your own measly job, because you... And then Nick gets up and leaves, which is the appropriate answer when you're being lectured by somebody that you're like, we're supposed to be friends, and you're sitting here telling me how much of a terrible person I am. Okay, bye. Back at home, Mike's mom asks how work was and how Nick is doing. He doesn't tell his mom that he and Nick had a fight. He's also thinking about how Nick's dad probably beat him as a kid, and that explains how Nick is basically his family. Quote, "I'm not defending Nick exactly, it's just that no matter what a narrow-minded dickhead he is, he's family. All these years, I've had no choice but to accept him, in spite of his bigotry and his shallowness and willful ignorance. No matter how deep the infection runs, family is family. The only other choice is to cut them off like rotten limbs." Mike meets with Chaz and they go to the island place that was built by minorities and was taken over by hipsters. He's drinking with Chaz, hearing about financing and how money is just a tool. So you should lie and cheat and steal to get it. He sees Remy sitting in a booth and is going to say hi, but then she's with a hipster, so he doesn't say anything. When he tries to slip out without her noticing, she notices and calls him over. Turns out that this guy is actually her brother. Remy asks him about the book that she's heard he's writing. He lies and says it's almost done. She gives him her number and says, "Hey, come around a little more. Yeah, I like seeing you." And then he walks out. Chaz is impressed that Mike got a girl's number because he thought that he was gay all this time. Can we also take a moment here to just say Mike is an impotent character? He did nothing and still got the number of the girl that he was supposed to be pursuing 80 pages ago, but then he never actually took steps to pursue. Mike thinks about how he might want to call Nick for advice on how to talk to a girl, but he's mad at him. So Nick is not going to get the phone call. But since he's not going to call Nick, he's going to imagine how that conversation would go anyway to make up the advice that Nick would give him. Then he calls Remy to ask her out for a couple of drinks. She accuses him of trying to get her drunk so that he could take advantage of her. Typical man, only has one thing on his mind. And then she's like, JK, JK, because definitely Remy would give her number to someone and then accuse them of wanting to date rape her when they gave her a call. This is inauthentic and just bad writing. Remy eventually does agree to go on a date though, and now they're texting for days before the date. Quote, "Not only were we flirting, not only was Remy initiating it, but we were actually developing intimacy. Those exchanges with Remy, the two of us, perfect strangers really, separated by 140 miles, were about the closest I'd ever come to having a bona fide girlfriend. Pathetic as it may seem, I must say it had me feeling all bullish." The narrator admits that he's still not doing anything and letting Remy do all of the work in courting him and flirting with him. He's not really into her, otherwise he'd be making the effort. He goes to a breakfast buffet with his family and he's just like, whatever. Quote, "Tall glasses of orange juice and bottomless cups of coffee. We gorged ourselves on bear claws and dunkers and bagels with smoked salmon. We laughed, we grunted, we farted, we sighed. I felt like a king sitting at a table seeing everybody so cheerful. Here was the Muniz clan and Freddie on a sunny Saturday morning with actual promise on the horizon. All the restaurant food that we could eat and no anxiety or guilt about the expense. My mom looked 10 years younger, sitting there with no cigarette between her fingers, no tumbler of wine, her crow's feet turning to laugh lines before my eyes. Freddie was high in spirits too." He goes to a flea market and gets a new lawnmower, but then he has to push it all the way home since he doesn't have a car. Some random man stops and gives him a ride home before accusing him of possibly stealing that lawnmower. But then, you come from a flea market, so I guess you're Mexican, you didn't steal it. The driver was just stereotyping. He drops him off and then moves along. Sometime after this, Mike discovers Freddie coming out of his mother's room in underwear in the morning. So now Freddie is with his mom and he's like, head of household has been replaced. Then they're having a sort of bonfire/party thing where the kid from outside Safeway is there learning how to guitar from Freddie, and Mike is made up with Nick, and now they're just staring at the stars, thinking about how good things are and how their lives are, possibly the best in the world, and then they sigh. Mike gets up to go to work, but Chaz is getting arrested. Mike is like, I don't care what his crimes might be, as long as he's not human trafficking or like kitty porn, then he's better than anybody else here. Chaz left his car to Mike, and then Mike drives it home. Now Mike's wondering what he can or should even possibly do, and is like, I couldn't even imagine anything good for myself because I was never taught to dream or that I was capable. If this is genuinely your mindset, then 1, you're a follower, and 2, all of these YA books with hopeless endings, they're dooming kids by telling them that they will always be victims, and if they're not taught better, then they will just remain that way. He picks up his book and he starts to read and complains that it's another MFA book and that it's too pretentious. Everything is too pretentious and the riches don't understand the poor. It continually just feels like it's mocking the working class by the way that Mike is, and this book is specifically for bougies to feel better about
about themselves. Quote, by 10 o'clock, I was biting my nails, tossing fitfully atop the air mattress. I turned on the lamp and reached for the $14 paperback, a luminous debut I'd recently picked up on the new arrival table at Liberty Bay Books, written by an MFA named Joshua. But it was no use. I couldn't connect. The writing was overwrought and the story was lagging. I just couldn't concentrate. I kept reading the same sentence over and over. The protagonist was eating an apple and walking across the parking lot toward her mother's car, her thoughts gleaming with a smoky chiaroscuro of nostalgia. All I could think about was the money that I'd blown in the past few weeks. It had to be $400, next month's rent. Somehow, I had to recoup that money. I'd like to think that I am somewhat self-aware. I got some blind spots, that's obvious, but all in all, I felt like I've got a pretty clear view of reality. More often than not, I know when and why I'm making a bad decision. Most of us do, and by us, I mean broke people. Take smoking, for example. If Mom didn't smoke away $10 a day, we never would have had to rent out our guest cottage to Freddie in the first place, right? Mom knows that. She's done the math a million times, but there's more to consider. For starters, she's perpetually tired. She's been working 50-hour weeks for as long as I can remember, and there's a good chance that she's clinically depressed. Smoking gets her through the second shift. It relaxes her when the pressure is mounting. It gives her something to look forward to during a break and after work and before work, and when she wakes up in the morning, it makes her heart beat faster. $10 a day, that's a bargain. Then there's the casino. You won't find Warren Buffett slumped as one-armed bandit. Don't expect to see a CEO of Verizon hooked up to a rolling oxygen tank, cigarette dangling from his lips, pumping tokens into the slot machine like an act of faith. No, it's usually us poor fucks, and yes, the very act of people gambling defies reason. Isn't that the point? All the observable phenomena in our lives, all of the personal experiences encourage us to keep our heads down and not expect any windfall. Hell, not even a fair shake. Your boss won't give you a break. The bank won't give you a break. The landlord won't give you a break. The politicians and the corporations sure won't give you a break. Even the clerk at the Massey won't give you a break. And why not give Lady Luck a shot? She's no crueler or more fickle than any other master. At least you feel like you've got a ghost of a chance with her. You know what you're up against. The rules aren't always changing like everything else. Gambling fools us into thinking that we are somehow impervious to the odds, and the universe might grant us an exception. Mike goes to the casino. This is why he's starting to talk about casino, and he ends up losing all of his money by playing for too long and leaves to walk home. He gets picked up by an old co-worker and is driven the rest of the way back. Then he's meeting with Remy for a date, and he's poor and he thinks about canceling, but makes a picnic meal instead. Suddenly, he's noticing everything that's physically wrong with Remy. Just so you know, he's not actually getting invested in her. Quote, Remy was already waiting in front of the Tribal Visitor Center when I arrived at 5:30. Her hair was different, but I couldn't tell how exactly. It may have been the light, but she seemed to be wearing more makeup than usual. She had a little wart under her eye, which I'd never noticed before, and skin tags on her arm that looked like toasted Rice Krispies. It sounds like he's not really that interested in dating her when he had been apparently obsessed with her at the beginning of this, where he was told, hey, go and ask this chick out. But now that he's got it, he's like, I don't really want it. The date with Remy goes very awkwardly. Mike's obviously just not into it, but he thinks that this is what he needs to be doing. Still, he's passive about all of it. Then he's aimlessly looking for a job and on a bus that breaks down, and outside he sees a protest. He doesn't know what it's for or why it's going on, but he admires librarian Andrew for being out there and sees it as heroic what he's doing. Bro. You can look at a protester and not be like, oh, that is heroic. Every time I'm approached by anybody with a clipboard to ask me to sign for something or to put something on the ballot when I'm at an event, whether it, is a convention where I'm just having fun, or if it's downtown when I'm just trying to do Saturday market or anything, I'm like, you are interrupting what I am here to do, which is not be political. Get out of my face. You're not a hero. So, there are times when protesting is whatever, but to go, oh, you are such a hero, look at you, and you don't even know what it's for. You just want to be special. Quote, I confess, I'm one of those people who complains about the world and doesn't do shit about it, aside from a little recycling and only when it's convenient. Sometimes it's pretty hard to see past your immediate struggles, you know? But for a minute there, watching those miserable protesters, I felt a stirring of a social conscience. How the hell was anything going to change if people weren't willing to take to the streets and air their grievances? But just look at me. What could I do, especially in the rain with this debilitating toothache? And shouldn't I be saving myself first? Anyway, wasn't it kind of like oxygen masks on airplanes? Wouldn't I be more help to anybody, to everybody else, if I could breathe myself? Still, it got me thinking that I could probably be doing more to make the world a better place. But first, old Mike Muniz had to save himself, and that meant making some money. Some way, somehow. He goes to a flea market with Freddie, and Freddie sells a bunch of porno tapes, and Mike sells his yard equipment because he's pretty much done doing that for now. Later, his tooth is in so much pain that he wakes up in the middle of the night and has Freddie try and pull it out. Freddie grabs the wrong tooth, and then he breaks down. Mike realizes that he's not holding a pattern anymore. He's not in a holding pattern anymore, which is kind of how he viewed his life before, which was he's just floating along in a holding pattern, not going anywhere, not going up, not going down, it's whatever. Chaz hasn't been released from jail yet, and his car has been repossessed now by the cops. He's looking for a job again, but he needs to go to Verizon for more minutes on his phone just in case he gets a call. He doesn't have any luck at Subway or a newspaper again, and he flips off the newspaper guy for making jokes about how bad Mike's grammar is because, Mike applied for a newspaper, wrote a really crappy essay, and obviously at the interview, the guy is like, bro, your grammar sucks. So, yeah, Mike flips him off. And also when Mike did his test essay, he buried the lead. And so newspaper guy pointed out, this is where you failed in your writing, and Mike got mad. Now Freddie, Nate, and Mike are driving somewhere when they get pulled over. This immediately escalates into the cop pulling a gun on them because of course it does. And of course the cop is suspicious of Freddie for just being a black man. And of course, it means that the gun is immediately brought out, not even asking for ID. The cop is yelling for Freddie to open his window, but it's stuck. Then he tells him to get out of the car, but the door is also stuck. He repeats that he wants them to get out of the car, gun trained mostly on Freddie for no apparent reason, and so Freddie climbs over the console when he hits the brake and the car starts rolling backwards. The cop shoots at it. Eventually, they do all get out of the car, and the cop is like, you know why I pulled you over? Your muffler's dragging. Stop being sassy about it if you don't want to get a ticket. Mike keeps talking back to the cop and then monologues about how if Freddie was white and the car was a Lexus, this wouldn't have happened. Freddie's like, bruh, you were lucky that we're walking away from this right now because you were such a sassy little bitch. Like, you shouldn't be acting like that. How is it that Mike started this scene by saying, I'ma keep my hands on the steering wheel, so hopefully the cop doesn't beat me up or shoot me in the face, and then he keeps trying to start a fight with the cop. He's either scared of the cop or he's not. He either knows better or he doesn't. But you don't start the thing off by going, I know how to respond to a cop, I'm scared of a cop, they're trigger happy, and then you keep starting fights with the cop. I'm so sick of these lazy stereotypes written for confirmation bias. I feel like I've read this scene 4 times in reading the ALA books, and it's the exact same every single time. Taking Nate to the doctor, Mike's sitting in the waiting room, is looking at all of the pores around him like he's in a zoo and making a statement in a monologue, quote, we were 20 minutes late for Nate's doctor appointment, but it didn't matter. They would never have been ready for us anyway, as ever. The waiting room was packed. I don't know what medical care looks like for the wealthy, but let's talk about the waiting room at Nate's doctor. You never see a guy in a polo shirt or a kid with braces or a girl in ballet shoes in there. No, it's always the miserable hordes, the morbidly obese, trundling oxygen carts, diabetics in sweatpants, bent old ladies with cat hair on their butts of their pants. There's always at least one person in a surgical mask with a relentless rattling cough, and usually a kid with Downs, talking even louder than Nate. A Mexican girl who couldn't even been older than 16 nursed her dark-haired baby while a toddler lolled around at her feet, and a dirty-faced boy of about 3 perched in the chair next to her, sucking on his fingers. She had the dulled eyes, complacent look of somebody who's undernourished. Sometimes when I see kids like that, I try to imagine what his life is going to be like in 30 years. Will he shape himself? Will he shape himself? Will he become a doctor or a lawyer? Or will he be shaped, bent, and molded by the external pressures of poverty and injustice? I think you can probably guess the answer to that one. I hate this so much. And again, you have the you're only a product of your environment. Poverty and injustice dooms you forever to being nothing. You don't need to even bring up, I don't know what rich people hospitals look like. The only reason you do this is to compare and denigrate and make some kind of statement. He goes back into the room with Nate and he feels guilty because of the condition of his brother. Quote, "The way she looked at me, the implications were inescapable. This was my fault. What the hell kind of brother was I? Nate was a child, incapable of making sound decisions. I was an adult. I should have monitored his diet. I should have kept him on exercise regimen. I should have been coercing him all along, fighting for his own good, no matter the inconvenience, no matter the black eyes or errant salt shakers. But I took the path of least resistance. I accepted the fact that things would get worse for my brother. That's old Mike Muniz over there. Take the easy way out. Accept the worst like it's inevitable. It's easier than changing the game, isn't it? Why bother changing the game when you can just talk a big one? Talk about writing novels and saving the world, but at the end of the day, you're just plying your special needs brother with a cheeseburger and Oreos and phoning in the rest." The next day, Mike turns in an application for Rite Aid when he runs into somebody outside with a clipboard getting signatures to try and stop Shell from digging because global warming sucks for like everyone, but especially us. This is the most after-school special scene that I have read in a long time about specifically campaigning. It ends with, "Wow, I actually felt kind of like a good person for supporting a cause, and that's more than I do most days since I'm not a registered voter. I'm going to change things right now." He leaves and runs into Miguel, someone he used to work with under his old boss. The two of them go for drinks and commiserate together, and Mike is like, "Well, at least my life isn't as bad as Miguel's, where his family is a million miles away and white men are trying to deport him because they're angry." Then Mike's at the store and drops his money, and who should approach but Doug Gobble, the kid who apparently sucked the author's dick in 4th grade. And yes, despite being 22 and having no relationship with Doug outside of that one instance, it's all that he can think about. Quote, "Relax, I'm just joshing, come on, I'll buy you a cup of coffee." So there I was, at Starbucks and Safeway with Doug Gobble. For all my discomfort, Gobble was downright chatty. He acted like we ran into each other all the time and it was nothing to do with dicks. He talked about old times at the church, but never mentioned our penises or the fact that he never said 10 words to me after our foray in the bushes. He talked about a few new listings and his plans to expand his real estate empire into Jefferson County, but made no single reference to holding or tugging or sucking dicks. And yet I was convinced that he was flirting with me. He talked about 5 acres they were developing over on Weaver and the new parking lot at the casino. "So, what about you?" he said, like someone who's not actually interested. "I'm a landscaper." "Ah," he said, "landscaper." "I'm also a writer," I said, a divulgence I regretted immediately. "A writer, huh?" he said doubtfully. "And you make any money in your writing racket?" "Not yet." Who the hell has time to read anyway? "So, what else have you been up to?" inquiring minds want to know. I was becoming increasingly certain that buy a cup of coffee was some sort of euphemism. All I could think about while he was chatting me up over his rim of his cappuccino was the little salamander between my 4th grade fingers rapidly engorging with blood. Was he expecting me to do it again, just like that? No, not that I would. Not for a cup of coffee, that's for sure. It was also confusing, you know? I didn't know what I was supposed to be feeling. Was I putting out some sort of signal I didn't know about? Why would Doug Gobble buy me a cup of coffee after all of these years if it didn't have something to do with touching penises? This man is so obsessed with this 4th grade event, which maybe it's because he's like, "I'm gay and I just haven't come out yet, so I'm kind of obsessing mentally over it because it's an unresolved issue." But the level of which he is obsessed and that he is reading in other people, but then you go to other moments and he is not thinking about it at all. And he is pursuing Remy. It's not built into the story very well. And then the level of obsession in these conversations just feels so over the top. Mike is super impressed by how far Doug's gone in life, doing so well for himself despite them coming from the same or similar backgrounds of no money. Doug is like, "I'm gonna tell you the secret of success. It's infiltrating communities. Infiltrate all the communities and fake relationships until you make it. Make yourself ubiquitous with the community and people will just throw jobs at you because they trust you." Doug drops Mike off at home and gives him a card saying to call him later. "I might have a job for you." And so from there on, Mike does a bunch of work. Again, Mike now gets this opportunity from not having done anything. He dropped his money and then Doug was super nice to him, gave him a job, and then also bought him coffee. And then there you go, Mike's taken care of, got a job, is doing a good job. Doug congratulates him on the job, it's a landscaping job, and then gives him a tip and continues on with how to get successful. Quote, "Remember how I told you about infiltrating communities, about being there? Yeah, attendance is gold. Actually, it's only part of the equation. But I didn't want to overwhelm you at the time. The way you build an ironclad network is by doing favors for people, especially if it helps you. Case in point, hiring you. I get a bunch of landscaping done and you owe me a favor. Still, during all of this conversation, Mike is only thinking about Dick. Doug gives Mike the rest of the rundown on success, doing favors for favors for favors for favors, and constantly trading favors but never calling them in. That's how you get places. And then he also says that he's hired Mike and is paying him the top dollar because he's not an illegal Mexican and his clients don't like illegals. Then he drops Mike off at home. Mike then meets with Remy for a date and she encourages him to write his landscaping novel. Mike's like, "Who wants to read about that, lol?" And Remy is like, "Well, I do." So just so you know, Remy is being super supportive of Mike and super encouraging of Mike the whole way through and doing things for Mike. And he is going to completely ignore her, insult her, and he is an asshole. He's leading her on. That's all that you need to know. The two of them start making out by Remy's lead, and then she invites Mike back to her place. He's like, "I got a big day tomorrow," and she just is confused by his rejection and says, "Oh, you're so cute that you don't want to just rush into things. We don't have to have sex right now anyways, winky face." Doug Gobble shows up at Mike's door and tells him about a country club job that'll put him on the map. He tells Mike that he needs to be a certain way though because white people don't want to see Mexicans in the neighborhood. Mike argues that he should be paid more because if he was paid more then he could dress nicer, look nicer, have a better car, drive a better car, and so Doug agrees. But Mike spends the next little bit arguing himself down from $25 to $23, and then he's bragging about how I'm about to make 21 big ones an hour. Bro, you could have been making 25 and you argued that that was overpaying you, so you argued down $4 an hour. While just being around, he's judging the old neighborhood and all of the money and how distant this island is from everyone else and how it makes sure only the right people get to move in and the right people aren't his family. Mike hates everyone for being a part of that. He's being a judgmental ass, but still somehow gets approached by a rich guy who is impressed by Mike's skills and offers him a job as his personal yard clipper for almost $30 an hour. Yet another opportunity that Mike didn't earn and didn't do anything for, it just falls into his lap. At least he recognizes that he's getting things without trying. But that's alongside the message that where he says, you can never get out of your circumstances, unless you're lucky and random people pity you and then give you everything that you need. Though now he's like, man, if I take this pay raise, I'm stabbing Gobble in the back, and he's kind of a douche, but he gave me a chance, trained me, bought me beer, brought me into this economic echelon. Also, he thinks about the unseen history, the dick sucking. Bro, this is so forced more than a decade ago, and you keep going back to it. You don't have an unresolved history. That was just whatever. At the best, it was just kids experimenting because whatever was going on with them when they were 10, okay? It is not deeper than that. You don't have a history with Gobble. Now he's damning his own loyalty for holding him back. Bro, you've only been loyal to people who don't help you or care about you, and now that Doug's taken a chance on you, you're not loyal at all. You're also not loyal to Remy. This book is such a lie. Gobble would do the same. Gobble told you about how he did favors for people all the time. So no, he wouldn't turn down the job. He would take the job to advance because that's his MO. Anyway, now Mike is going to a country club party that he was invited to. How he was invited to a country club party after we were told that this neighborhood doesn't like Mexicans, I don't know. It's just another opportunity to put Mike somewhere that he shouldn't be, but somehow he got there without doing anything. Mike almost didn't go because he didn't know how to dress, but Freddie gave him a porno tie. Now he's at the country club using Doug's car, but taking off anything that references Doug and resenting the rich people that he's around. Mike is just a ball of hate and judgment, isn't he? But it's those rich people that are the problem. He's at the party, schmoozing and judging all of the white people. Someone else says that they are all inbred to keep the money in the family. And that white people only wanted Mike around because he's exotic. They don't want you to suck up. They want you to be here because you're exotic, said one of the other partygoers. Also, everyone keeps asking Mike about the book that he's writing and then, have you published yet? No? I have a child who did poetry for a while, then they grew out of it. No writer is serious. Apparently, everyone here has a child who used to write poetry, which
I guess not surprising if we're gonna go with stereotypes. Mike's still not happy about being at the party. Quote, I have a half of a mind to flee the country club. These people are reptiles. Somehow, Mike's takeaway is Gobble believed in racial equity and upward mobility, but these people don't, despite having welcomed him to their party. He remains at the party thinking about how he doesn't belong and he shouldn't have accepted the offer and pitying himself while he judges all of the rich people around him. Meanwhile, the rich people are cheering him on, saying that he's doing pretty well for himself, isn't he? He's in this rich environment, getting great jobs with rich people doing their yards. I mean, he's at a country club right now as a guest, for goodness sake, rubbing shoulders with the riches. And Mike is like, yeah, but I'm not here for the same reasons you are. He's there for the party. He's not employed to be there. So yeah, he kind of is there for the same reason the rich people are there. He was invited by one of the other rich people. Mike is offered another job by somebody at the country club and he turns it down saying, I don't think that I can take it. I'm happy where I am. The whole reason that he came to this party was to portray Gobble, wasn't it? And he just saw all of the rich people and went, ew. So he's changed his mind. Mike's actions don't make sense for his stated goal. After that, Mike literally goes, I'm feeling pretty proud of myself for doing the right thing. So this whole thing is just an exercise in what makes him feel better than other people. Quote, I'll admit to feeling pretty proud of myself for doing the right thing. I mean, by passing up Pidgeot's job offer, with the dilemma resolved, I didn't see the harm in telling Gobble. In fact, I saw a distinct advantage in demonstrating my loyalty to Team Gobble. Maybe he'd bump me up to $23.50. Are we forgetting that Mike talked Gobble down from paying him $25 an hour like 2 days ago? It really wasn't that long. He meets with Doug and tells him that he turned down a higher paying job, a $30 an hour job, and Doug is like, what the frick? You should have accepted the job. It was a better job. Also, I don't want to be paying you $23 an hour. Bro, what is going on here? It's just, I'm forcing you to quit to take a better paying job because Mike can't do anything for himself apparently. And Doug is like, I appreciate your loyalty, but screw off. This book doesn't know what it's doing. Gobble says that his goal is to change the demographic of the neighborhood and he needs Mike to do that. Quote, look, I want to turn the neighborhood over. I want to bring the country club up to date, so to speak. And I'm not talking about closeted gays, ex-professors, or reprobate judges. The clubbers love that stuff. That's as close as they get to interesting. I'm talking about ex-people, self-made types, athletes, entertainers, rich people of color. I've got a potential black buyer, and that could really stir things up. A Seahawk, 1 felony arrest, a couple of misdemeanors, but otherwise a good family man. I want to get this guy and his family in here. That's cool. So you do recon. How do you think that you got the job offer? I need some eyes and ears in here. Then they move on to having a nonsense conversation that looks like the author is having writer's block. Quote, wait, you got me a job offer? Get me a listing and I'll give you a truck, Mike, outright. How can I get you a listing? Just be yourself, except don't talk. Okay, but who would I be Don't talk. Got it. I'll just ask, stop talking. Right, I understand, but what? No, really, stop talking. You mean now? Yes. He rubbed his temples. Sorry, I think I'm dehydrated. Your voice grates on me sometimes, no offense. Here, drink some water. I'm trying to lose weight. But you're skinny, says you. No, really, dude, you're skinny. Please, stop talking for a minute. This should have been dropped on the editing floor. And now Doug is renting Mike his truck so that he can do a listing and tell him what to do and demanding money because Mike owes him favors. So now Mike's got his new job and is excited about his $60K a year. He texts Remy about meeting up for a new date. She says they can meet later. She's working a new job too. When he goes to accept the job, the offer has been dropped to $15 an hour and it looks like Gobble had called him and gave him that recommendation. Maybe punishment for not taking the opportunity, but this is so dumb and doesn't make sense when the guy literally just told Mike to take the job for better pay and also got him to pay $300 a month to rent his car. This only hurts Gobble by hurting the income Mike would have been making, and it doesn't stick with this whole idea of making favors because Doug talked about doing favors for other people to build the relationships in order to make them owe him. So now why is he all of a sudden making Mike lose out on things when he could be getting Mike to owe him, which would follow his MO of everything he does creates the opportunities that Doug
lives by. While Mike is doing yard work, he's complaining about only making $14 an hour instead of $23 an hour he was making yesterday. Clearly, he should have realized how quickly things can change, but he's in a bad mood, and so he's being in a bad mood. Pidgeot, the rich guy, is saying that he can help Mike with publishing his book. He's got connections from when he taught at an MFA, which that is how it works. Freaking everybody at my MFA knew each other at different universities, and then just got each other published at each other's universities. Quite honestly. Mike keeps doing the yard work and thinking about how he resents both Pidgeot and Gobble for changing how much he should be paid without his involvement, and now he wants to get back at them. So he's like, yeah, let's move a black man with a criminal record in here. Ha 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 ha. Legit, the author has some gall to treat a person like this. Quote, Pidgeot followed me breezily back and forth from the bluff, hands in pocket, twice stepping on my heel, now and then reciting a line of poetry. Every time I stooped to plant one of the courtiers, he stood right over me, blocking the sun. It wasn't until he started beating around the bush about the place next door that I recalled Gobel's directive to gather recon. The real reason I landed this job, the one Gobel forced me to take, negotiating the terms without my consent. I wasn't exactly in a hurry to do any favors for Gobel, since the guy sold me out to the tune of a 50% wage cut, but I have to admit, I like the idea of a black guy moving in next door. That stuffy old neighborhood needed a shaking up. An all-pro defense back with a criminal record might just be the ticket. I hope the guy drove a ghastly green Humvee limo emblazoned with a silver Seahawk and a vanity plate that said, "Can't touch this," or "You mad, bro?" I hope he parked it right in front of where everybody had to look at it. I cannot believe that this author is like, I'm just going to insert a black person, and the only purpose that they're going to have is to use them as a way to denigrate the neighborhood. Like, that is the author doing this with these characters. The character sees no other purpose or existence or respect for this character, this person, except a way to try and insult the white people. And he thinks the white people are racist. Mike, I got news for you. At this point, I'm pretty sure the author is using "lol, my book was banned for penis" as an excuse to cover the egregious stereotypes in this book that there are really no defenses for. Other books have been canceled for far less, but everyone in this book is a racial or economic stereotype that has been used to attack people with. Now, Pidgeot and Mike are talking about the possible black neighbor's record. He punched a cop while going to Sanford, and Pidgeot doesn't want that man in this neighborhood because it's a well-established neighborhood. Pidgeot's like, I don't want him to move here. My family has been here for hundreds of years, and don't football players like something a little more garish? Mike's like, the funny thing about rich people is they think that they buy your confidence even when you don't pay them well. Don't pretend that you keep secrets even if you're paid a lot, Mike, because you obviously don't. We've seen it. Mike finally gets away and back to Gobble to talk about things. Why is he even working with Gobble at this point when Gobble sabotaged his wages? I don't know. Why Gobble would do that when he says he gets favors from people and that's how he does his business? I also don't know. This whole thing with Gobble is just really dumb. Mike's so frustrated by everything he tells Gobble that he wants to bomb the neighborhood. Gobble is like, don't ruin this for me. Mike pretends anything has changed. Quote, something in me snapped. My tolerance, I guess. Suddenly, I didn't give a shit about the world in which I'd found myself hopelessly enmeshed through no fault of my own. I didn't care about the money or the truck or what happened to anybody involved. I just wanted to go back to Squamish and read a book and eat a sandwich. But he's always been this way. There is no change here. Now Mike's done working for Gobble and threatening to take the truck as Gobble tells him to get back out of the truck. Mike's now referencing, quote, if you don't give me my $500 back, I'm going to tell people that you put a dick in your mouth. When was that, Michael? When he was 9? This whole conflict now is him screaming in this neighborhood that Gobble put a dick in his mouth when he was 9 years old, and so then now Mike wants to out Gobble to the neighborhood for having experimented as a child as a way to control him. Mike is a terrible person. I don't want him to have a good outcome, but having already read this book, he's going to have a good outcome, and we're supposed to, like... Causing this scene is enough to get Gobble to throw money at Mike. Nice sexual coercion and threat there, Michael. He decides that he doesn't like Gobble or Pidgeot, and because of that, Gobble has too many faces, and Pidgeot is clearly a Nazi. Gobble keeps offering Mike a job at a lower and lower rate, so then Mike again brings up, why won't you ever admit that we sucked dicks? Why is Mike so stuck on 9-year-old dick sucking is the question. Quote, it was your idea behind the parsonage, I said. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. No, Mike, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. I'm talking about youth group. Gobble checked his watch, then pulled out his cell and checked that too. Youth group? You mean with the Bible songs and the crackers? What the hell? You're fucking crazy, Mike. Good luck, he said without looking up. Nice job on the Wardwell place. Why won't you admit that we sucked each other's dicks? He looks up from his phone. Excuse me? You heard me. Why won't you just acknowledge it? I would like to also point out how even this situation, back when he was 9 years old, Mike did not do because he has literally no initiative. Mike keeps pressing the issue of sucking dick when they were 9, and Gobble is like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I have to go. You should get yourself checked out. Would this constitute as sexual harassment as he keeps pressing on since he's not getting the response that he wants? Quote, you hatched the plan, Gobble, and you knew it. You lured me behind the parsonage. We talked about girls. We shared a Hershey bar, and then you showed me your dick. Whoa, what the hell are you talking about? The next thing I know, it's in my mouth. Are you high? I can't believe you, Gobble. Dude, you're insane. We sucked each other's dicks, and you're pretending it didn't happen. Have a nice life, Mike, he said, repocketing his phone. And just like that, he turned and started walking toward his condo. You're the one who needs a psychiatrist, I yelled, practically foaming at the mouth. You're fucking crazy. Mike turns this moment of Gobble's rejection of either Mike's false memory or accusation or not wanting to recount the situation into a learning moment. Quote, he didn't even look back, the cold-blooded little prick. That's when I realized what I should have realized years ago, that there were people in this world who either had no conscience or just severe memory deficits, tailored to their convenience. I could see the advantage of either one immediately, yet both ideas were abhorrent to me. Either you didn't care or you chose not to care. The way I see it, you've got to be accountable or you're nothing. Without personal accountability, you can talk yourself into anything. You can leave rubble in your wake and never look back. That could mean wars, genocides, ecological disasters. And what for? What was the advantage? Fuck those guys and their money and their power. Then Mike realizes that he needs a ride home and calls after Goble. Goble is like, yeah, no, I need to freshen up. Good luck, Michael. But Mike won't take no for an answer, so he starts screaming in the middle of the street about how Goble sucked his dick. Quote, Goble just kept walking. A little old lady on the second floor opened her window and peered out to see what all the shouting was about. Your neighbor, Doug Goble, likes to suck dick, and he doesn't want anyone to know about it. I wonder why Mike is a loser, failure, and a jerk. So now Mike's out of a job and he's just sitting in Walmart reading a book. He's checking out this guy named Andrew at the register and judging him as being kind of a loser. He's got curly hair, a coexist shirt, and braces. Mike is like, most people who are like this would be kind of a dweeb, but Andrew doesn't seem self-conscious about it. Andrew is excited to see Mike, and I don't know why or how because Mike is such a jerk. We've been given no reason as to why he should have any friends at all, but things just fall into his lap all the time. Andrew asks Mike if he wants to help picket Walmart. When asked why, Andrew's like, you know, no meal breaks, no paid rest, inhuman wages, sexual discrimination, urban encroachment, union busting for starters. And Mike is like, I'm too chicken liver to tell him that I just submitted an application to work here, but also I don't really want to work here and I won't get the job anyway, so yeah, Andrew, let's pick it together. Since Mike has nowhere else to be, he hangs out at the library until Andrew collects him at 3 o'clock to picket. He's mentally like, I'm gonna be honest, I shop at Walmart because it's affordable and I'm poor, but it changes everything to hear Andrew say they are evil overlords victimizing people by selling them cheap stuff. My mind has changed completely. Andrew monologues about how there is stuff that's more important than saving $1. Quote, what about the quality of life? What about community? These things are more fundamental to our happiness than saving $1. This is totally missing what people who are poor are actually struggling with. But you know, you're right. Morals typically matter more than somebody that just wants to go to Walmart to buy the cheaper stuff. Just starve to prove your political message. As they walk around, Andrew explains that if they shop at Walmart, you take money away from the poor man who runs Dick's Hardware, and then your neighborhood suffers because Walmart's not paying taxes and Dick is actually part of the community. We need to picket Walmart so that there are sidewalks and so the 1% of the population doesn't own 85% of the world's wealth. And Mike is like, quote, Andrew made it sound like we were about to save the world, like we were being the change that we wanted. I didn't need any more excuses to stick it to the man, believe me. Here was an opportunity to stand up and make a difference, and all I had to do was occupy a space. I could do that. While occupying spaces, Mike judges how the protesters are doing and decides, quote, they need a leader, and that leader, telling them how to protest, might as well be me. His first protest, he's like, I already know how to protest better. Someone's got a sign that says, standing for our jobs, and Mike's found out that no one in this group has ever actually worked for Walmart. They claim that they're doing this shutdown for the rights of the workers because the workers can't advocate for themselves, or they risk losing their job. Mike's feeling good about standing up for people who never asked for his help. He's feeling pretty good about becoming a protest leader, but he's worried about running into people that he knew because this town is pretty small. It's not too long after that where his BFF Nick shows up. Nick is like, "Who's this guy?" pointing to Andrew. "Your new boyfriend?" For some reason, after that rudeness, Mike still introduces the two. Mike and Nick have at each other, even though Mike is like, quote, "Why did he have to be that way? Why all the bravado, the constant razzing, the persistent alpha male hectoring?" Mike takes a brief moment to say no one really cares about the protest except for some seemingly mentally damaged people. But that mentally damaged guy over there with the helmet buys him and Andrew a hot dog, and while Andrew doesn't normally eat red meat, he eats this one because he's hungry and it's been a long day. Quote, "Even though Andrew usually doesn't eat red meat or support Walmart, I couldn't blame him for inhaling his, being that he came straight from work and hadn't eaten since lunch. So I wasn't about to deprive him of his nourishment by saying anything about the working conditions in meat packing plants." So apparently even Andrew's morals are so shallow that he'll violate them if he was working all day, and that Mike has better education or interest in meat packing plants and like vegetarianism than Andrew, when it's apparently Andrew the one that has that moral. Then someone else that Mike used to do landscaping with shows up to buy cigarettes and asks Mike if he works at Walmart now. Mike says no, but he says that he's protesting. When the guy is making some other comments in Spanish to his friend, Andrew appears to defend Mike's honor and invites the newbie to protest too. The cop from before shows up and tells everybody that they need to move their protest, while Mike remains sassy and tells the guy, "What are you gonna do if we don't move? Shoot me?" And the cop is like, "Don't tempt me." Mike also thinks that he has a right to be there when Walmart is technically private property. None of this is believable. Next, Mike's over here at Andrew's house, admiring it, being jealous of it. Andrew's the type that has his values posted on his wall so that you don't miss them. Quote, "There were even more lists plastered in the kitchen, on cabinets, on the refrigerator, even over the sink. Qualities: kindness, thoughtfulness, forgiveness, ambitions, strong heart, clear mind, pure body. Do's: listen, learn, love. Don'ts: judge, project, hold grudges." "Oh, the lists?" he said, registering my curiosity. "My constant attempt to be mindful. I tried yoga, but it gave me gas." "So what are you trying so hard to achieve?" I asked. "I'm just trying to figure out how to be happy without being the best at anything, you know? What about you?" Then they're talking about Mike being an artist, and Mike can do whatever he wants to do, be whatever he wants to be. Here we also learn that Mike is hungry because he didn't eat the hot dog at the protest. Quote, "Even the Taco Bell smell was okay. I'm not saying that I was famished or anything, but I should have eaten that jumbo hot dog at the protest instead of taking the moral high ground. Those exorbitantly priced organic greens didn't stretch too far, if you know what I mean. Not that I didn't appreciate Andrew's effort." Mike also admires how Andrew is a man of action. Quote, "No, they look good," I said. "I mean, they will, you know, afterward." The truth is, I hardly noticed Andrew's braces anymore. I could already see his future smile, and it was a winner. As far as I was concerned, all of his lists and reminders were working too. He was someone to aspire to. Kind, thoughtful, and forgiving, he had a strong heart and a clear mind. I had no doubt that he'd see Patagonia and Aruba, and he'd read Finnegan's Wake eventually. Shit, he'd probably find a way to do a little space travel. The big goof. The guy had a plan, not an angle like Chaz, not a self-serving dictate like Gobble, but an actual plan for a better life, a better world. He wasn't about to sit there with crooked teeth and take the scraps the world's offered him. He did things. He attended lectures. He bought local. He joined the Toastmasters group. He was going to mindfully plot his course, and I respected the hell out of that. He and Andrew talk about their lives and their families, and Mike is impressed because Andrew's actually listening and interested and wants to meet his family now. Andrew says that he wonders if his mom wishes that he was someone else, while his dad pretends that he doesn't exist. And Mike is like, "Bro, you're freaking amazing. I cannot believe that your family treats you like this." And Andrew clutches Mike's hand and gives it a squeeze. Moving on to the next chapter, called Making a Stand, it starts out with, quote, "Though I possessed zero street cred as a protester, having never been arrested, detained, gassed, or beaten, Andrew didn't hold it against me. He assured me that I'd get my opportunity sooner or later." Apparently, Andrew has been arrested twice during protests. He shows up at a protest at a pet store, and Andrew is mad because where is everybody? He even let the news know that he was going to be there, but nobody showed up, and we get lines like this. Nevertheless, we did occupy a space and nobody could take that away from us, and we carried ourselves with dignity and a requisite amount of moral outrage, hoisting our picket signs high, marching purposefully to and fro in front of the entrance like a pair of armed sentries. Not that there was a traffic to contend with, not like Walmart. Nobody was going to vacuum or repair Radio Shack. Mostly, people were going to TJ Maxx and Starbucks, and one or two people to the hair salon. The requisite moral outrage and the way this is described just makes it look like virtue signaling, doesn't really care, it's all for the look, and that's what Mike's thing is he wants to look like a good person, but not be an actual good person. No one stops to talk to the two of them until a little 8 or 9-year-old girl who's waiting for her parents comes by, and Andrew educates the child on what a puppy mill is. This reads like a receptacle for the author to spit into. This is further proven when Mike notices the little girl doesn't need convincing, but Andrew continues ranting on about specific animal abuse cases, probably to tell the reader, quote, "Some puppy mills," he explained, "are littered with piles of dead, partially eaten dogs stuffed in corners and hanging from rafters, and in some puppy mills, starving adult dogs eat their newborn puppies." Around now, Waverly's face muscles started twitching visibly and her chin began to quiver. I nudged Andrew, but he was in the zone. One miller stuffed 5 Rottweiler puppies into a bird cage and let them starve, except that they kept growing anyway, and eventually they were too large to be extracted from the cage and they had to be euthanized through the bars. I think it was about at this point that Waverly began to hyperventilate, but Andrew was on fire. When the females are no longer fertile, they're left to starve and their bodies are fed to. Traumatizing children in protest maxing is what Andrew is here for. Andrew freaks the girl out, she screams, and they get kicked out of the area. Andrew takes it hard. They go to a faux place and Andrew buys for Mike. Then Andrew breaks down about how he's fake and a hypocrite. We get to the point of why this is probably in libraries to begin with, as Mike says, quote, "You're a librarian. A librarian is a public treasure, a respected community resource, a goddamn saint in my book." This is just fellation. The ALA, the library associations that sell this book, and they're like, look, I'm being praised as a hero, a saint, I have a halo. That's all I get from this. Mike's like, "You're not a bad person," and Andrew is like, "There are things that you should know about me before you go further, Mike." And Mike is like, "What do you mean further?" This makes Andrew sad because obviously Andrew thought that they were just short of dating. 2 days after the puppy mill protest, he runs into Gobble at the grocery store and is like, apparently Gobble doesn't care that I outed him as a cocksucker to the neighbors. Again, making it so this should have been a more recent thing than like 13 or 14 years ago. Mike also judges Gobble for being a go-getter. Quote, "Immediately I realized that I wasn't mad at Gobble anymore. I'm not sure the guy could help himself. He wasn't all terrible. Almost nobody is, deep down. Once you strip away all the terror and trauma and neurosis and bad conditioning, the thing with a guy like a Gobble is that he scratched and clawed to get to where he was. Being a creep was an imperative in his way of thinking. Anything less was weak. Like me, Gobble started out on ass end of an uneven playing field. But unlike me, he had a nose for the goal line. While I was perfectly happy to settle for a mid-range field goal and even a punt, Gobble drove 90 yards uphill into the jaws of adversity, the world at large, scratching and clawing the whole way to the end zone. And here's the thing. People who scratch and claw tend to be short-sighted. Apparently, Gobble was harboring no ill will toward me for outing him as a cocksucker to the neighbors either. For whatever reason, he'd never admit what happened between us, and I had to just accept that. What did it really matter? I mean, maybe you're misremembering it being Gobble. Maybe it wasn't him at all, and now you're just like saying a bunch of insane stuff at Gobble. That's my guess, honestly. Gobble, for some reason, offers Mike another job after everything that happened, even though Mike has proven himself both untrustworthy and selfish and kinda insane. But Mike's like, "I'm gonna take the moral high ground and say no to this job." Then Mike is disappointed that turning on the job from Gobble doesn't have the effect on him like he'd hoped because Mike wanted to hurt this guy. So remember that Mike thinks that he is this moral superiority and that, everybody else sucks, but then he is constantly doing things to hurt other people, wanting to hurt other people, and insulting people. Later, Nick calls to offer Mike a job at Les Schwab. Why? I don't really know. It's just random and out of the blue. Mike isn't doing any labor and he's being rude to everyone, but people are now clamoring to throw work at him. The last time Nick saw him was at the protest in front of Walmart, where it was a rude interaction and they fought each other. Mike turns down the job because he doesn't want to put up with Nick's attitude all day and the way that he talks about people. Nick is mad that he risked himself at his job by putting in a word for Mike where he works. Mike is like, I'm just tired of doing things that I don't want to do, so I'm just not going to work a job like this. Then he's reflecting, don't you need delusional psychology and unqualified confidence in order to have that job? Mike's then sitting in Starbucks with Andrew, conversing about the protests and politics and 90s cartoons. Then Andrew goes back to work and Mike leaves. Then he sees Chaz. Chaz says that he's trying to start a new business venture, online commerce called Fried Chicken. Chaz promises Mike a job if he can get it off the ground, but right now he's just trying to secure financing while living in his car. Chaz has offered a place to stay at the house with Mike until he gets on his feet and his business running. The next day, Mike gets a call from Tino saying that he's got a lead for a job and could they go out for some Mexican food, which Mike subsequently insults. Tino offers Mike a job to do yard care startups together, and Mike is amazing and also white passing, so it's going to work out. How can he be both white passing, but also the white people looked at him and were like, well, you're only around because you're exotic. This has happened in multiple books now. Tino's like, okay, look, I'm picking you as a business partner because you look white and people want to pay me less because I look Mexican. Mike argues with Tino about being given 45% instead of 50% because Mike only likes to argue for lower wages most of the time. Yes, Mike is arguing to be paid less. So Mike's gonna complain about wages, then constantly argue to be paid less. Can we stop this in the narrative where he's like, I am so poor, why don't I have money? Screw the man, but also you want to pay me 30 bucks? How about 15? How about 12? Just pay me 12. And then, no, I'm so poor, why won't anyone pay me? Michael, you're the reason this happened. Mike is now excited to turn down every other opportunity because now he loves mowing and doing yard work and they can pick their clients. Now this has turned into some empowering thing where he's like, sure, it might look like I'm where I started, but I have the power now to do what I want to do, and that's the difference. Mike then goes to meet Andrew, quote, always punctual. Andrew knocked on my shed door at 5:12 p.m., wearing a pea green cardigan over his PETA t-shirt and a pair of Levi's so new they still had that fuzzy sheen. Completing the look were Birkenstocks with white socks, quintessentially Northwestern. Having recently undergone some misguided attempt at subjugation, his hair remained suppressed for the moment, though it was beginning to show signs of imminent revolt in the back. I don't know what these people have in common, and it really just feels like the author mocking a certain stereotype. Andrew, and also going, hello, fellow millennials, look, I understand you. Andrew congratulates Mike on being a business owner now and says that he has so much talent, maybe people will want his topiary skills now. Mike's like, nah, cause he's always negative and needs other people to stroke his ego for him. Andrew asks for details about the business and Mike is like, well, Tino's handling pretty much everything because why would Mike handle anything at all, especially in his own business? He's not gonna do anything. He's being cheap and choosing food, but Andrew pushes him to order more to celebrate. Then, as luck would have it, Remy is also here. Andrew pushes Mike to go and talk to Remy and then sighs wistfully because, no, you have to go talk to her. We know what that means. Mike really doesn't want to go, but eventually lets Andrew tell him to because that's how Mike operates. He sits down with Remy and barely engages because, quote, he just doesn't feel like trying anymore, as if he ever bothered to try in the first place. We saw it, you didn't, Mike. Quote, how can I explain it? It had nothing to do with Remy. Remy was fine. Remy was great. Probably not the one, but certainly the closest thing I'd encountered so far. She was nice and funny and down to earth. The thing is, I guess I didn't feel like trying anymore. I felt like being myself. Rather than having to perform, I just wanted to celebrate with Andrew. He of the clunky braces and the organic lettuce and the freakishly clean automobile. Andrew who changed my mind about Walmart, who opened my eyes to the inhumanity of puppy mills. Andrew, who chose to believe in me despite all of the evidence against me. I look back at him, alone at the table, a little forlorn, smiling sadly to make the best of it. The Mike just sort of awkwardly talks to Remy and then goes back to Andrew and pretends he actually flirted with her when in reality he didn't. They drink and get drunk and wander out of the place. They're walking home talking about Mike's Dick Mermaid art when Mike kisses Andrew and he notices the cut in his lip from his braces. It goes on to be the most pretentious description I have ever read, which is more funny considering this book is dragged, pretentious writing. Quote, I won't bore you with the particulars, how I staunched his bleeding lip with the pressure of my tongue, or how I cut my own lip on his braces, and how he stopped my bleeding lip, or the rest of the intimate stuff about the breath growing heavy and our hearts beating furiously and our man parts straining against our stout denim trousers. I'm not writing erotica here. I won't give you any literary pretense either. You don't need to know about the aching veracity of my tumescence or the cataract of guilt frothing weightlessly over the yawning precipice of my personal dawn, like that fucking means anything. Yes, there was guilt and there was ferocity, but all you need to know is that kissing Andrew made perfect sense at the moment, and I intended on kissing him as long as he'd let me, no matter how faggy it was. Why weren't we doing this all along? I said when we finally stopped for air. Then go back to Andrew's home and they have sex and Mike is fine with it. Then over breakfast, they make a list and determine what to do with their futures. The day after, Mike was like, this is fine. He's like, oh no, I've messed up my life, as he lays beside Andrew. Quote, in the darkness of Andrew's bedroom, I tortured myself with such consideration, inching away from him so that the bare skin of our shoulders was no longer touching. And he's thinking about how he's got to go home and tell his family that they have to think of him as somebody else because now he's with a man. Eventually, Mike is sitting down, sketching random stuff and thinking about topiaries. Quote, I pick up one of Andrew's numerous empty notebooks and started dashing off a series of playful sketches. Bigfoot eating a triple-decker ice cream cone, a big-headed alien wearing a cowboy hat, riding a unicorn, 2 swans humping. I must have made a dozen sketches, and not one of them was trying to save the world, but any one of them would have made the world a slightly better place, at least in my opinion. What if I started using mesh and wire? How much could I elevate my game? Think about what I could do with all the ivies, like the duckfoot in front of Bainbridge City Hall. Imagine a sea serpent with arms, wearing a jean vest, shredding a solo on a flying V guitar. He could be sticking his tongue out like Gene Simmons. I'd tilt the headstock up 180 degrees so that he was obviously in the middle of a solo, and think of all the red sedum along the foundation, and imagine a rolling sea of blood. Oh man, how cool would that be? Or what about all of the privet in front of the tribal center? I could do up bears on all four, an eagle and a raven. I could sculpt a fishing party in a dugout canoe. And how about all of the holly on the new traffic island on the south end of Polsbo Junction? Imagine a Pegasus, muscular and proud as hell, a friendly ogre, a pair of gigantic cobras, and a group of enchanting rabbits. Damn, I was good. Andrew was right. I had to put myself out there. Restless to create, I located a pair of scissors in Andrew's desk and a couple of empty coat hangers from the closet and retired to the kitchen, where I set about patiently to work reshaping his herb garden so that when Andrew arrived home from the library 4 hours later, he would discover on his windowsill Cupid shooting an arrow straight into the ass of a sumo wrestler who was reaching out to touch a panda bear in a pirate hat, who was sitting next to an elf who was swinging a golf club. I don't know, if I was Andrew, I would be mildly pissed that this person just started cutting my indoor plants without asking first, but you know, whatever. And also, in case you're wondering where the topiary thing came from, none of it really came into the book ever at all. It just sort of got thrown in there, and there's no build-up, there's no goal. Mike never wanted for anything. And I just, at this point, we're so close to the end of this book, and I was thinking, this book is like so bad. Mike goes home and he's going to tell Freddie first about Andrew. Freddie is like, oh, so you're gay? At least you're not black. And then he tells his mom and she's like, yeah, so I already knew. I've known for a while. And Mike's surprised, so he says nothing, but that's it? And she's like, what? You want something else? Time to go and meet up with Nick and deal with him in this finale, because we're doing a coming out tour now, apparently. He tells Nick that he's gay, and Nick is like, you're just telling me this? And Mike is like, I'm just learning about it myself. And Nick is like, can we just go and play darts and like not talk about this? Nick leaves and Mike is like, well, it feels like things are over with Nick. Quote, watching him go, I told myself that I really didn't care if I ever saw him again. Already, Nick was starting to feel like someone from my past. Maybe loyalty was conditional after all. Maybe my burgeoning sense of self, my developing identity as a socially engaged, newly gay, working class, half-Mexican topiary artist demanded such wholesale sacrifices as leaving my old friends in the dust. Why would that demand that you leave your old friends in the dust? Whatever. Then Mike realizes that he's been leading Remy on and flirting with her, but leaving her hanging, and now he knows why he needs to go and talk to her. He apologizes for sending mixed signals, but she walks out before he says that he's gay, mostly leaving it on, "It's not you, it's me." In November, Nick calls Mike to ask him to come over for a beer and watch the game at the casino. After drinking some, Nick tells Mike that he's brave for being gay and good luck with the dick sucking. Just don't tell me about it. Of course, you gotta have the little golf clap, the congratulatory, hey, congratulations for just being you, for just existing, you are brave. Moving on to The Good Life, you get an introduction to Mike's new job and how happy he is and how he's getting jobs and he doesn't care if he's making topiaries for criminals because he gets to make topiaries. As long as he's getting paid, he really doesn't care. That wasn't what he was saying earlier when he was doing stuff for yuppies and rich people. It was not about getting paid, it was he hated his clients. So, don't pretend you got some moral high ground, Mike. You're a terrible person. He talks about how hard it is to be an artist and come up with ideas, but you just have to step back and think about your ideas and then get back to work. The next chapter, Mike continues to admit that everyone around him is doing all of the work. Andrew put in the work of the legalities of the business and his phone accessibility. Tino did everything for him as far as payroll and taxes go, and Freddie gave him the money to start up the business. So everything again just fell into Mike's lap. Chaz taught him lessons about dreaming big, and then Mike lectures that anyone who gets anywhere has a bunch of people to thank. It's not all about them, and they don't really do all of the work. You can't credit any of your own hard work at all. Because Mike can't stop talking, it's now Thanksgiving, and he's sitting at a table with everyone looking at him, and he's ranting, quote, "Here is Mike Muniz in the bosom of his ragged tribe. Maybe we're not the DuPonts or the De Beers or the Rockefellers or the Rothschilds, but at least we're not perpetuating world domination. At least we're not fracking or drilling the Arctic or hiding our money offshores or bankrupting schools or foreclosing on anyone for our own profit. Hell no, we're just going to make an honest living, and our numbers are growing. Tino and his roommate are swinging by later with a case of Tecate. Goebel might even drop by for a little dessert, but I'm not holding my breath." Mind you, we've had no update on Goebel since whenever I last mentioned him with Mike turning down the job, and even then when Mike got another job offer from Goebel, the last time we saw him, Mike was screaming in a neighborhood about how Goebel sucked his dick. So we've had no closure on Goebel. We've had no reunion with Goebel. We've had nothing with Goebel. So why is Goebel suddenly being mentioned in this and suddenly is a friendly? Is this just because we're just nicely wrapping up everything and for some reason they're friendly? I don't know. And then there's a random introduction of a speech by Andrew that he gets cut off of at the Thanksgiving table, and Mike just says that you're bigger than whatever gets in your way. Real after-school special stuff. Then Mike and his family and his friends all go to Disneyland. How does this book end with a hurrah of going to Disneyland as a group when he was protesting capitalism 2 seconds ago and multiple times throughout the book? And he spends half of the final chapter complaining. The author and publisher should be ashamed for foisting this on anyone, and the ALA should be even more ashamed for selling this to people. That is the whole of Lawn Boy. I'm gonna go over a couple of extra random thoughts that I've got. The book is very angry in its narrative. The New York Times review called Lawn Boy's protagonist Mike Muniz a Holden Caulfield for a new millennium and stated Evison's subject matter and wit is a welcome departure from the self-conscious MFA trust-funded prose. School Library Journal called Lawn Boy eminently readable and deeply thought-provoking. Evison's deceptively simple novel takes on issues such as race, sexual identity, and crushing weight of American capitalism. The Washington Post said Evison takes a battering ram to the stereotypes about race and class and called the book an effervescent novel of hope that can enlighten everyone. So even just looking at the pretentious responses to this book by obviously the school journal, the New York Times, and whatever that Washington Post, this book is rich people patting themselves on the back going, I understand the struggle. But if you read it, it is obviously somebody who has never understood the struggle, is play acting like they do, and is mocking people for going through the struggle. They go, oh, I understand you. Look, it's basically like I've lived the hard life, bro. Again, okay, now that I'm at the end of this, I'm gonna say the only thing that tells me this is autobiographical is that 100% I assume. Feel free to tell me if I'm wrong, but there's no evidence anywhere of what makes this semi-autobiographical. I 100% believe that it was just Evison as a teenager living on the island in Washington, because that's a rich place to live,
and looking at the landscapers in his rich neighborhood and then daydreaming. This is fan fiction of what he thought the landscapers in his neighborhood felt like. That's the only thing that I can figure out for semi-autobiographical. The fact that this is hiding behind LGBT issues and sexual content, I mean, yeah, there is sexual content, it's mostly in discussion. And it's so unnecessary to the plot how often he talks about sucking dick that it doesn't even come into the storyline. It is such a forced thing that he's gay, which tells me that this book felt like it was either forcing it for social points, which is the same thing that it did with the cop scene, or it did it as a means to shield itself in order to foist it, because I would not be surprised if this was a scam to get the book notoriety, to sell the book, because if you go to Evison's Wikipedia page for this book and for his author self, the section on this book and this book being banned is bigger than any other section. So this is why he is known. So it feels like a scam to get noticed. Because people, it doesn't matter what your political affiliations are, people are using getting canceled as a means to get popularity because it helps their profile to make themselves a victim. The voice of the book is in first person, and it reads more like an out-of-touch boomer who has never experienced hardship than whatever he is trying to portray. The book is praised for the language of the working class, not an MFA, but the character used words and talking styles that are so not representative of the type of character that he's supposed to be. The author also basically mocks the working class with the way that he writes Mike. Mike talks about the upper middle class person who thinks he's better than you because you're a blue collar worker, and then he, in his version of a blue collar and poor worker, is also judgmental nice guy TM on everyone else. Mike is a jerk, and the ending of this book is not justified because Mike doesn't learn anything, he doesn't do anything, he's just considered like this self-righteous thing where he is just a downtrodden, and so then everybody gives him everything that he wants, and he's okay with criminals, he's okay with Chaz, he's obviously saying he's doing landscaping for criminals, and he's like, whatever, but we're supposed to praise him as somehow brave and strong, and then take lectures from him. This book also continues the trend with the ALA/YA books where it says, no one told me that I could achieve, so I didn't think I could achieve, quote. But the thing is, I don't really know how to think big. God knows nobody ever taught me. In fact, I was taught precisely the opposite. I was taught to always expect and prepare for something less because 8 times out of 10, that's what's coming. To actually expect anything bigger or better was simply beyond my reach. So if you train people, and this is one of the problems I've had with a lot of the ALA books, is all of them tell you that you are screwed and there's no getting out of your situation, and it's just the system and the universe working against you, so you better not even try. And I have a problem with that because you're selling kids and the youth and the next generation hopelessness and anger, and then you wonder why they're as angry and hopeless and nihilistic as they are, and this is why. The constant referencing to Doug's dick is so forced, and it was the only way that this author could even attempt, apparently, to be like, what is it like to feel like you're gay or you're coming out? And he couldn't explore it any other way. If he could have prolonged the interaction with Doug, with other people, make it more natural, but you just have him fighting with Nick about being a homophobe and then obsession with sucking an 8-year-old's dick, and it's weird, okay? It would have been less weird to have this focus on Doug if Mike had more recently had an interaction with Doug and then been like, hey, I know that you are closeted of this thing, whatever, but going back 10, 12 years and then continuously bringing that up was weird, and to hold it against Doug and then to also forcibly out him as punishment for not behaving, and there was never any consequence to Mike for anything, and nobody called him out on being a terrible person. He just constantly rewarded. This was yet another book that's almost all dialogue, but for the internal diatribes and preaching. Praise of this book says that it's hard work and diligence, but Mike literally does nothing to get what he wants. He just complains and lets people do things for him, and everything drops into his lap. I don't get why this book is called Lawn Boy. It does not focus on lawn work at all. It does not focus on him building that career. It does not use the lawn building or the topiary as a metaphor, as a simile, as an analogy. It doesn't actually have him build up the lawn or suffer for the lawn, and doesn't actually have the lawn as an important part of the story. He could have been a barista. Mike also cannot go between getting offended at Nick calling gays fag and then moving on to go and out gobble to his neighborhood while aggressively calling him a cocksucker because he doesn't like him. There is no reflection on Mike's behavior and the way that he treats other people, but he's going to go and lecture Nick so that he is hashtag the nice guy, so that he is hashtag the activist, so he is hashtag whatever that is. No. Remy just sort of disappears without a trace until the coming out party, which again, there's no balance of Mike discovering himself and having this struggle of who he is and the person he's trying to portray and the places that he's trying to go, which is what this is attempting to do, but it doesn't actually do it. The characterization in this book is trash. The word choices are not fitting for the type of characters that we are presented with. He is so much better than everyone else. He is a white person wearing Mexi face, apparently, proven more by his own hatred of Mexican food and culture. Topiary really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's not even mentioned except maybe in his first job where he says that's what he wants to do, and then mentioned at the end when he becomes a topiary artist. But otherwise, it's not anything. The romance with Andrew came out of nowhere when you could have bonded over the entirety of the book since he was in the library. Finally, closing on Disneyland made absolutely no sense for this book. I understand that that was his big dream from the beginning since he wanted to go there with his dad. But if you're going to rage against capitalism the entirety of the book and even have a closing argument, preachy moment about how terrible capitalism is, then you cannot go to the biggest capitalist franchise theme park and make that your goal, because it shoots yourself in the foot with your own messaging of what you're trying to say. Maybe it would have been better if he'd gotten a job at Disneyland to do the topiary at Disneyland instead of, criminals. Maybe that would have been a better roundabout. And then every day he gets to go and live that life. The use of Disneyland just wasn't thought out. It didn't even reference it as a goal from the beginning because it didn't even reference it as a goal with, I can afford it now because I have a great job. Considering how expensive going to Disneyland is, I've never been. I'm poorer than Mike, but nothing here is actually used or built upon, so nothing matters. There are no consequences. It is just a long string of lectures and I'm better than you. Those are my scattered shots. I'm sorry that they are so scattered, but it is what it is. With that said, let me know your thoughts on Lawn Boy. Have you read it? Will you read it? What do you think of the story? I gave you a lot of quotes too. It's been a couple of weeks since I read this and then I'm now recording it, and it is worse than I remember. But yeah, that was Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison. With that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer.
For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die.
Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that?
To the left, plain black letters read along the wall, "You walked in the corridor." Once that ends, "You chose the dark" is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me.
Where the hell am I?
You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?